let's get right into it. I'm already recording. Give us a breakdown, just first of all, what the Supreme Court is considering today or looking at.
So there are two things in front of the court. We have an executive order from President Trump signed very early in his administration that purports to roll back what's called birthright citizenship. The 14th Amendment to our Constitution says that if you're born in the U.S., you're a citizen. And the Supreme Court's interpreted it that way since the late 19th century. Is that the correct reading of that amendment to our Constitution? So the first issue is, can the president, by executive order, roll back the constitutional guarantee of birthright citizenship? There's a second issue that's maybe what they're really interested in, which is the power of the federal courts to enjoin, to block executive orders by the president. The order in this case is a nationwide order. It applies from one judge to the entire United States. And there are a lot of those orders these days because there's a lot of litigation about President Trump's first 100 days actions. And the question of whether a court can do that, should do that, what the factors should be, has been a nagging problem in this kind of case for a decade now, at least. And so the court may be just as interested in the procedural issue of how much power does one federal judge have as they are of the very important substantive issue.
Well, and my understanding was that they're really looking at not necessarily the constitutionality of birthright citizenship, but okay, can he apply some of that or ending that to while it's being considered if it is constitutional?
Exactly. Yes. And so there's the amendment's not going anywhere. I mean, the only way you can change the amendment is a very long, tortured process that's only happened a few times in our country's history. But you can kind of nibble around the edges. You can interpret, you can clarify, you can put in new standards. The key language in the amendment, by the way, is it says that if you're born or naturalized in the U.S., you're a citizen. But there's a phrase people tend to forget about. It says you're born or naturalized and subject to the jurisdiction of the country. And in recent years, people have questioned that and said, well, if your family is not here lawfully, are you really subject to the jurisdiction of the country? And that's where this executive order has gone, is to say, look, there's just something that's not clear about this. I get it. If you're born here and your parents are citizens, you're a citizen. But there's this gray area, and I'm the president. I'm entitled to kind of fill that in and instruct law enforcement with an order until we know something else about that. And so that's the substance and procedure really come together there in an interesting way that is probably why the Supreme Court took the case.
Do we have any idea, which way some of these justices are leaning, or is there any indication of what might happen?
So it's a kind of a blank slate. This question of how much power one judge has been touched on in a lot of concurring opinions and dissents in the last several years. And justices on the Supreme Court have said, look, we got to get some standards in place here. But no one's come right out and said what those standards ought to be. And so I think you're going to see in the arguments today some trial balloons, justices saying, well, what if the rule for injunctions was 1, 2, 3? Could we all live with that? And kind of test it out and see what people have to say about it. And as to birthright citizenship, the Supreme Court didn't get a lot of cases about this. They settled this question in their mind over 100 years ago. But this is a new wrinkle on it. We have obviously a whole new court with a different view on how you interpret certain things in our law. And there might be some interesting views about that expressed too. But I think most of the questions will probably be about this procedural issue, because that's where there's a lot less law to guide everybody. It's just sort of developed ad hoc, case by case for several years.
When you've kind of touched on this, but how might, this decision or what comes out of the court by the end of the summer, I guess, impact future executive orders or the way that that's handled, especially within the Trump administration?
Sure. I mean, the question of how much power a federal judge has is fundamental to how courts work. And if one judge can't issue a nationwide order about a law that's nationwide, right? I mean, the citizenship thing here is about the United States, the whole thing, the whole country. It becomes more difficult to challenge actions by the federal government. You have to try other procedures. You have to file a whole bunch of lawsuits in a lot of different places. And the difficulty of that just makes it easier for the executive and legislature to enact their agenda. Now, whether that's good or bad, there's no position on that. It depends on what's being argued about. But just as a matter of the balance between the three branches, if the court says something here about, whoa, we're not talking about birthright citizenship. We just think you went a little too far with what you did here at court. Then the next case and the next case and the next 100 cases are all going to kind of tilt a little more towards the administration than they otherwise might.
Right. Anything else that you would add, or any, you know, kind of key
Oh.
takeaways or things to look for that?
You've covered it all, and I got to throw in ad hoc. It was like
Yes.
a lawyerly sounding phrase there.
Love it.
Ad
Awesome.
hoc.
Right. Well, I appreciate you. Thank you for
No,
talking.
good stuff. Those are great questions. Thanks a lot. Good luck on all things birthright citizenship.
Yes, a lot. All
Take
right.
care.
Talk
All
to
right.
you
Bye-bye
soon.
now.
Bye.